Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to our, I can't remember what number session. We've done a lot so far, but today we are honored to have two great educator, and I'm excited myself to hear and learn from their experience and their highly education researchers. My name is Samar Dalati Ganoum, and I'm proud to be part of WISER, the Islamic Education Weekend Islamic uh, Schools Education and Resources. I should have that straight. I mean, shame on me. And what is WISER and how did it start? I will try to summarize the whole thing in a couple of minutes, and please feel free to ask any question. However, I placed a link to our website in the chat if you like to check it out. But Wiser started with a dream I had long years ago. And finally, amazing educator, her name is Najwa Oscar, decided to be the founder of this amazing organization. So what is Wiser all about? Wiser is dedicated to raising the quality and of the supplemental education, educational programs like weekend school or after school programs that nurture spiritual growth, develop character, and install God consciousness. That's our simple mission. However, our vision is every Muslim child has access to high quality educational program to learn about Islam. Our enrichment programs preserve the faith, which is wiser provide models and framework for weekend Islamic school to build young Muslim characters according to the Quran. Wiser also dedicating to nurturing spiritual growth as an American Muslim identity or with the American Muslim identity and develop God consciousness through teaching of Islam, Quran, and the Sunnah. We do believe also teaching Arabic is a tool to be able to comprehend Quran. Wiser has so many programs and so many services. One of the services, what we're doing today. Also, we do mentoring school, evaluating schools, and mentoring communities who want to start Sunday school from scratch or weekend school from scratch. And the most important, we provide certificate or accreditation to weekend schools who wish to have that. I'm not going to talk more about Wiser. I will invite you all to visit our website. But today also we have two amazing guests, and I will start with our first one, which is Miss Sajila Munir. And Sajila Munir, I mean, I have never had the privilege to meet her, but I mean, through fast meeting today and last week, I was so impressed um, with her skills and ideas. So Sajila Munir serves as the Outreach and Partnership Manager at the Institute of Social Policies and Understanding, ISPU. And please, Sister Sajila, if I made any mistakes, please correct me or stop me and do the correction. Where she leads national strategies to amplify ISPU research through community contact and partnership and public engagement, which is very impressive. With a background in advocacy, community organizer, and strategic communication. Sajila works at the, oh gosh, okay, works at the intersections of research, education, and social changes at the ISPU. She has uh, spearheaded outreach effort for the lines are so small for research on American Muslim experience across range of areas, including education, media, oh gosh, representation of interfaith engagement and public policy. Her work ensures that this data-driven research reaches the educator institutes and communicates and communities that can turn insight to impact. With a lot of respect, I introduce Ms. Sajila Munir. The mic all yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Summer, and I apologize for the very long bio. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. As Dr. Summer mentioned, my name is Sajila Munir, and I am the Outreach and Partnerships Manager at ISPU. So I wanted to start off by giving you all a little bit of background about ISPU. So ISPU is a nonpartisan, nonprofit, non-religious organization that builds understanding and strengthens communities by laying a foundation of facts. So our mission at ISPU is to provide objective research and education about Americans who are Muslim to support well-informed dialogue and decision-making. So a little bit about our history. ISPU was founded in 2002 after 9/11 to build a fact base. Originally, it was Michigan-based and it focused on international issues. Now it is nationwide and it focuses on domestic issues. So a little bit about our research. Our research is focused on the Muslim community. It is rigorous, solution-seeking, and we have 4 main areas of focus: family and wellness, community capacity building, American pluralism, and American Muslim contributions. So to kick us off, I wanted to share a little bit of ISPU's data on Muslim families and on Islamic schools to contextualize this discussion a bit. So one of the salient issues facing Muslim American families today is their children's education. Private religious schools are uniquely important for Muslim families, and this is because 40% of Muslims report having school-age children. So let's start off with some key statistics. Muslims are the youngest faith group in the US. So what does this mean for Islamic school educators and administrators? With such a young population, the demand for education, whether it's full-time or weekend, is only going to grow. This isn't just about meeting current needs, it's also about shaping the future of Muslim identity in America. It's also a call to invest in infrastructure, in teacher development, and in long-term planning. A young community means that we'll need qualified educators, culturally competent leaders, and school environments that reflect our students' values for decades to come. In short, the youth of our community isn't just a data point, it's a responsibility, and Islamic schools are one of the most powerful tools that we have to meet that responsibility. So from here, let's look at how American families are choosing between public and Islamic schools. So nearly 3/4 of Muslim families have a child in public school. So for a majority of families, weekend Islamic schools are the only consistent space where children learn about their faith in sort of a structured, community-centered environment. This reinforces the importance of investing in our curriculum, teacher training, and positive school culture, even if it's just for a couple of hours a week. Secondly, Muslim families are more likely than the general public, although less likely than Jewish families, to send a child to a private religious school that is associated with their religious group. So what does this mean? It shows that Muslim families want faith-aligned education, but many aren't accessing it. Something is getting in the way, whether that's affordability, whether that's accessibility. So this isn't just about numbers, it's about potential. Muslim families are telling us they value faith-based education, and our role is to make that vision tangible and accessible for them. So from here, let's dive into weekend Islamic schools specifically. Feel free to raise your hand at any point through my presentation. I would love to hear your experiences and what has and hasn't worked from you. as the people obviously on the ground in Islamic schools. So much of the information that I'll be presenting today is based off of ISPU's report titled Weekend Islamic Schools, Are They Preparing Children for Life Ahead? So the purpose of this report was to identify the needs, opportunities, and challenges for weekend Islamic schools. The report focused on 5 key areas, but for the purposes of this webinar, we'll be focusing on 3: professional development for teachers, weekend school administration, and interfaith and interorganizational learning. So our first topic today is teacher retention. So this is one of the most pressing issues facing Islamic schools. For weekend Islamic schools, while the dynamics differ from full-time Islamic schools, the impact is just as significant. Our report identified 3 key challenges. The first was that most weekend Islamic schools rely on volunteer teachers, many of whom are juggling full-time jobs and family responsibilities. Without contracts or long-term commitments, schools often face week-to-week uncertainty about staffing. Second, there's a lack of incentives and resources. With limited budgets, there's often no funding for stipends, for training, for professional development. Teachers rarely receive feedback, mentorship, or growth opportunities. And third is staffing tends to be inconsistent, which affects both learning and morale. Ultimately, retention is also about school culture. When teachers feel unsupported or disconnected, they leave. But even small investments in recognition, in inclusion, and empowerment can build a culture of belonging that makes teachers want to stay. So what can we do about this? Our report offers 2 key recommendations for improving teacher retention in weekend Islamic schools. First is to set aside a budget for professional development. Even small investments in training show teachers that they're valued and that they're supported, which goes a long way towards improving retention. We'll explore some examples of this shortly. Second is to create formal teacher policies. Creating clear frameworks around classroom practices, around curriculum, and conflict resolution will promote that consistency and reduce misunderstandings and create a more stable and positive teaching environment. Ultimately, retention isn't just a logistical issue, though. It is relational. When teachers feel valued, when they feel included and invested in, they're far more likely to stay. And part of retention begins with recognition. So here are some basic recognition-based incentives that can sort of supplement further professional development incentives that can be provided to weekend Islamic school teachers. So one of them is certificate and titles. So you can offer official titles like lead instructor or educational fellow that can be used on resumes or on LinkedIn. You can provide them with awards and spotlights. You can highlight teachers' achievements in newsletters, khutbahs, or on social media. You can host teacher appreciation events. So now moving into teacher recruitment. So before we can retain great educators, obviously we need to have effective systems in place to recruit them. But for many weekend schools, this still remains a challenge. Our report identified 3 key recruitment issues. So the first is that fewer than 10% of schools have formal recruitment policies, things like job descriptions, like outreach strategies, like onboarding processes. Without them, qualified candidates may be overlooked, and the process lacks that transparency and consistency. Second, there's often no clear definition of what qualifies someone to teach. Without written expectations, it's hard to assess fit or to provide support, which leads to both frustration for educators and for administrators. The third is that the volunteer-run nature of these schools leads to sort of inconsistent recruitment practices with no sort of formal structure. Hiring often depends on who's available rather than who's best equipped. This creates gaps, it creates burnouts, and a lack of long-term sustainability in staffing. So if we want to strengthen Islamic education, we have to treat teacher recruitment with the same care as any other core school function, even in a volunteer-run model. That starts with policies, expectations, and consistency. First, schools should establish clear and realistic guidelines for who is qualified to teach. That doesn't mean requiring education degrees, but defining the knowledge, the skills, or the experience needed for each role. A simple rubric or a checklist helps ensure that fairness and sets everyone up for success. Second is to create incentives and structures to attract qualified teachers. Even small gestures, recognition, training, flexibility can go a long way. We'll also explore some specific examples later in this presentation. Third is to involve experienced educators on boards to strengthen hiring practices. Their insights help to bridge that gap between policy and classroom realities and ensures that thoughtful and strategic recruitment. In short, recruitment doesn't require unlimited resources, just clarity, structure, and collaboration. So here are some additional examples of ways to support teachers to increase recruitment and retention. So regular check-ins or listening sessions with leadership to hear teacher concerns, volunteer coordinators or admin assistants to help teachers focus on teaching, providing template lesson plans, worksheets, or rubrics to reduce prep burden on teachers, offering on-site childcare for teachers that may have younger children, and fostering women's leadership, as most weekend schools are led by women. So moving on to teacher professional development. When we talk about improving weekend Islamic schools, professional development is often mentioned, but too often overlooked. So our report highlights 3 key challenges with professional development. First is that most teachers lack training in pedagogy and classroom management, from lesson planning to student engagement. That is a major support gap that school leaders need to address. Second, fewer than 10% of schools offer ongoing training, leaving most teachers to figure it out without feedback, without mentorship, or growth opportunities. Third, even when training is offered, volunteer teachers have low participation rates, understandably, as many are balancing jobs, families, and other responsibilities. So the real challenge becomes, how do we make professional development feel doable and meaningful? That might mean offering shorter focus sessions, using online formats, or integrating professional development into school calendars so it's part of the system and not an extra task. So now that we've explored some of those challenges, let's look at some recommendations to strengthen teacher professional development. First is to mandate online video modules as a baseline certification for all teachers. These can cover key topics like lesson planning, like classroom management, like age-appropriate instruction. It's a scalable and low-cost solution that creates consistency and shows a commitment to quality. Second, you can leverage existing resources from institutions like the University of Toronto, like CISNA, which offer research, they offer training and adaptable frameworks for Islamic schools. Finally, is to promote ongoing learning through platforms like the American Academy of Religion and the Religious Freedom Center. Sharing curated lists of free or low-cost online courses empowers teachers to grow at their own pace and at their own time. Yes, Fawad? All right. So here are some additional examples of professional development perks that are free or low cost that schools could consider implementing. So schools could partner with institutions to offer certification pathways for interested educators. They could partner with Muslim organizations that offer free or discounted online courses. They could provide opportunities to lead workshops, to mentor new teachers, or to join curriculum committees. They could offer classroom management workshops. They could offer letters of recommendation for jobs, for graduate schools, or for leadership programs. Another key area for growth identified by ISPU's report is teacher involvement in decision making. So when teachers are included in decision making, it fosters that ownership, respect, and that belonging as well, all essential to both recruiting and to retaining teachers. Our report highlighted 2 main challenges. The first is that many weekend Islamic schools lack that formal governance structure, so decisions are often made by mosque leadership, with little or no teacher input, even when those decisions do directly impact the classroom. Second, teachers are rarely represented on boards, despite playing a frontline role. This disconnect between policy and practice can lead to frustration and disengagement, ultimately harming schools' culture and specifically teacher retention. So, how do we begin to address these challenges and strengthen teachers' voices in school governance? First, the most impactful step to include teachers is to include teachers on mosque boards. Their presence ensures decisions are grounded in classroom realities and helps align school leadership with actual educational needs. Second, you can establish what are known as professional ethical learning committees, or PELCs. These bring together teachers, parents, students, and community members to reflect on and improve school practices, empowering teachers as true partners in that process. Third, you can also create a dedicated board of education for weekend schools. This body can provide consistent oversight, clear goals, and structured support, ensuring that professional standards and a unified vision for long-term school growth and teacher development. So our next area of focus is community and parent involvement, a critical but often underused lever for strengthening Islamic schools. When schools intentionally engage parents and the broader community, it not only lightens that load on teachers, but it also creates a more sustainable and joyful school environment. This makes schools more attractive to new educators and helps retain existing staff. So our report highlights three key challenges in this. The first is that there's often limited communication between schools and parents. Without regular updates or collaboration, trust often breaks down. Second, parents and schools may have misaligned expectations, with some might be expecting memorization or strict discipline, which may clash with the school's vision. The third is that there's minimal structured parent involvement. When parents are only seen at drop off and pickup, we miss the opportunity to build that shared ownership and stronger school community ties. So let's look at a few ways we can start addressing the challenges around community and parent involvement. First, we recommend establishing professional ethical learning committees, as mentioned in the previous slide. These committees not only bring teachers into decision making, but also shift parent engagement from passive to purposeful, fostering that trust and shared accountability. Second, we can engage families in service learning projects. These activities help students build character while strengthening bonds between school, family, and the community. Lastly, you can take inspiration from models like the Muslim Leadership Academy, or MLA, where families participate in joint volunteer efforts and shared school goals. Adopting elements from that model can transform parent involvement from transactional to being truly collaborative. So here are some additional examples of ways to involve parents and the community in weekend school. So as we mentioned PELCs, we mentioned community service projects. Um, there's also family volunteer days, inviting families to help with classroom support, organizing events, etc. Parent-teacher circles or forums, holding monthly gatherings where parents and teachers collaborate on student development, school goals, or curriculum feedback. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. If there are any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat or to raise your hand before I hand it off back to Summer.
Yeah, sure. We will be dedicating some times by the end of the session for questions and answers. However, if there is like something urgent, you can put it in the chat and we'll do our best to answer it. To save the time, thank you very much. It's very informative and I'm very impressed and I'm sure all of us benefit from your research. It's amazing. You did amazing job. With that, I will introduce Dr. Sheta Khan, which is another presenter. We saved the best for to the last. She is the executive director of Islamic School League of America, ISLA. We all know ISLA, and an advocate for advising Islamic education in North America with PhD in teaching curriculum and change. She specializes in research-driven strategy that strengthens school culture, leadership, and teacher development. Amazing. Dr. Khan dedicated to fostering excellence in Islamic school through collaboration, resources, and professional growth opportunities. She is a co-author of report Improve Islamic School Attracting and Retaining Qualified Teacher in US. I'm so excited to read that book. US full-time Islamic school through analyzing comprehension co-published with the Institute of Social Policy and Understanding. With a lot of respect, I will give the mic to Dr. Shada Khan.
Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. So nice to see so many of you here and really honored to have the opportunity to speak here today. I appreciate Wiser, mashallah. I was sharing with Dr. Samar that I myself am a product of our Islamic schools, of our weekend Islamic schools, in fact. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be on a panel where we're speaking about both weekend Islamic schools and full-time Islamic schools. And I see many of my colleagues and friends here as well. Jazakumullah khairan. I actually can't see if I am sharing. I'm not accustomed to this, so let me give this a try. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
Beautiful. We can see it clear.
Okay, Jazakallah khairan. Let's see if I can get there. All right, so I know that many of you guys are familiar with myself and with the ISLA. For those of you who are joining, perhaps because you've heard about this webinar through Wiser and ISPU, mashallah, really honored to be in partnership with them. Just to share a little bit about ISLA, the Islamic Schools League of America is a nonprofit that's been around, mashallah, for over 25 years. We began that early on in a very grassroots way, helping Islamic schools, many of them actually transitioning from weekend Islamic schools into full-time Islamic schools. As our community saw that there was a need for more systematic teaching of Islamic education and a perhaps completely inclusive and holistic approach to teaching, more and more of these full-time Islamic schools were being created around that time. And subhanAllah, from that time until now, we've been engaged in gathering data from our full-time Islamic schools, providing resources, trying to disseminate that research and engaging in more valuable research, and engaging in professional development, really with a major focus on full-time Islamic schools. But alhamdulillah, as I've seen and experienced just by listening to Sajila speak about the weekend Islamic schools, and myself being a student of, a graduate of weekend Islamic schools, there's definitely a lot of overlap here when we talk about attracting and retaining talent. But there's also a lot that's really different, right? Before I get into that, I guess I'll just invite you all to follow us on our social media and be in touch, inshallah. I believe Sister Lisa Kaler is also joining us. She's the program manager and development director with ISLA, and she might be able to put some of these links there in the chat. But you know, one of the things we know that we need to do at the ISLA is lean in on each other. That includes you as educators who are joining as leaders of Islamic schools and Islamic institutions, and that includes other organizations like the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, ISPU, with whom we recently co-authored this report, Improving Islamic Schools, which I linked there in the chat for you to check out. I hope that you do check it out. You know, a lot of the things that we're going to talk about, I want to get through some of the data quickly just to establish that framework, but really want to open it up to you all and ask you what's worked for you. What are your struggles? Because I'm going to actually let you in on a secret right now. I don't have any answers for you. I do have advice, recommendations from what we can garner from this data and from my conversations with many other educators and leaders of Islamic schools. But perhaps you're trying something innovative, something's working for you, or perhaps you've tried everything and you're still struggling, or you've got something else that you want to share. So I want to invite you right here at the onset to please be part of the conversation. I can't see your chats right now, but inshallah at the end of this I will. I'm going to actually pay attention to my time here. So check out the report, inshallah. This is just a little portion of the data that we collected. This is part of the Islamic School Profile Survey that was led by Dr. Samar Al-Majida, who you may be familiar with as well. And the portion that we're going to talk about right now is just a small part of the data that we collected. What we're going to focus on is the teacher salary, the benefits, their teacher recruitment and retention data. And this data is, subhanAllah, the world is moving so fast. It's from November 22nd to June 2023 academic year. So inshallah, we're looking forward to collecting more data, having you all participate in that so we can provide more updated information. And we had about 104 schools participate in this from the approximate 350 to 400 schools. So it's a subset. We're not claiming that this is a representative sample, but it is interesting and important. We're going to start off by just talking about what are teachers making on average nationwide in other schools settings, not in our Islamic schools. And this is also data that's collected from 2022. It's grabbed from the National Center for Educational Statistics, NCES. And what you can see, I'm going to get to the next slide, is on average, these teachers were making about $66,000 across the board. And you can see that presented in this, broken up into these different groups. Islamic school teachers, on the other hand, based on the data that we gathered from this report that's available in this report and the study, we're only making about 60% of the annual average wage for teachers nationwide. So, for example, elementary schools teachers nationwide and all other school systems were making about $65,000 on average, and our Islamic school teachers on average were making about $36,000. So when we think about our schools and hiring and retention, and in particular as we continue to raise the standard and raise the bar for our own selves, our own institutions, as we absolutely should, and we want to hire certified teachers with degrees in education, elementary education, and content knowledge expertise, we have to realize what the market is and I'm sure that those of you who've joined do realize that. And how do we get around this? That's part of the conversation that we need to have. Nearly 2 in 5 Islamic schools offer what was categorized as low average annual compensation. That means between $20,000 to $30,000 annual salary. Mid-range salaries on this report, you can see those are between 31 and 40,000, and high is just 41 through 60,000. And we're just talking about full-time teachers here, right? And so you can see that only about 25% of our schools were offering quote unquote what we're classifying as a high range salary between $41,000 to $60,000 salary. And then our report gets into more details about like where those schools were located. I want to say that many of those schools offering higher salaries were in the Northwest, for example, right? We know that there's regional differences. So you can look into the report to see more specific data around that. Islamic schools with high financial resources, meaning their annual operational budget is between perhaps $3 million and above, are able to pay higher teacher salaries. It's a lot of this data is also like, okay, we get it. That's what we suspected, and now we have the data to back that up. Islamic schools where more elementary teachers were more credentialed, for example, they have a bachelor's in education or they have additional credentialing, those schools are paying those teachers about $4,100 to $4,800 more per year. And similar for middle school teachers too. More than 2/3 of Islamic schools paying high teachers' salaries also offer staff a high number of benefits. So you see a correlation between those schools that are able to offer the higher salaries are also often offering more benefits. And you can see what benefits we surveyed our school leaders for. These are some of them here. So most of our schools are providing professional development. Sajila highlighted the real benefit of professional development. I'll talk a little bit more about that too. Paid sick leave, employee tuition discount is another really high value and highly offered benefit from our Islamic schools. 87% of the schools taking our survey did say that they offer some level of employee tuition discount for their children. And you can see many fewer, though, offer retirement planning. And we've partnered with Saturna, for example, to talk about how you can actually provide that kind of retirement planning if you are a school leader who is currently joining, our board member who's joined this webinar and you don't offer that. It's not as hard as it seems, and it's not as expensive as it seems, but it's absolutely something that our teachers deserve. We don't want them to have to, as our brother Hood from Saturna has spoken about, you don't want them to have to collect zakat after they've retired from giving, all of their time and youth and professionalism to Islamic schools to then have to be retired and taking zakat. And so inshallah, we strive to do more and do better. So I'm going to move through some of these. Again, we do see the correlation between high annual revenue, schools that are able to get more money through tuition, through donations, through, what is it called? Voucher programs and all other kinds of revenue streams. They are also the ones that are more likely to be able to provide health insurance and paid sick leave, for example. Now, when we talk about where it's hardest to hire, to recruit new teachers and get them, it's actually interesting. The data is not very clear here on why certain positions are so difficult to hire. Perhaps you as a school leader have some insights into that. We have our own hypotheses and thoughts, but alhamdulillah, Arabic, Quran, Islamic studies seem to be easier for our schools to hire. Now, how satisfied are you with the qualifications and that pool? That's a different side of the conversation that we need to have. But it's far more difficult. I mean, one of the most difficult subjects to hire for seemed to be English language arts, and math was not too far behind. Elementary lead teacher was another position that was very hard. And very interestingly, here's where you have some data where it like makes you scratch your head. Even for schools that were offering high teacher salaries and benefits, they still had a very difficult time hiring for English language arts. So I don't know if that's just, I've heard that historically ELA teachers have the most work that they have to take home. So that's a conversation that we can have. We can explore that with our ELA teachers. Why are you leaving when they're leaving? Are you administering exit surveys with your teachers when they decide to not stay? That might be something that's actually very valuable for us to do as we investigate further what's going on. But alhamdulillah, also a lot of our schools have high levels of teacher retention. About 75% of our schools reported that they were able to retain 3/4 to 100% of their staff. And when you think about how difficult it is to hire, this is a really good thing. There's a natural cycle of teachers that are leaving. Obviously, people retire, people move, especially in the past 3 to 5 years. People have been a lot more mobile, working from home and that sort of thing. So this is natural that there would still be some schools that are struggling with it. But in schools where you're barely able to retain, 25% of your staff, then you as a board or as a school leader, have a lot to investigate and really want to try and understand what's going on and probably work hard on improving that school culture. And inshallah, that's something that we can talk more about as well. And unsurprisingly, teacher retention is higher in Islamic schools with higher teacher pay. Also, higher number of benefits are provided. So this is where, there's a little bit of conversation to be had. Now, we're always going to have, I know, mashallah, we have some school leaders who are starting new schools. So you have like the whole staff that you have to hire. So, what are some strategies to consider? And one thing that comes before we even talk about, our virtual presence and everything else is like, how are you branding your school? Is there a unique mission? We were having a conversation earlier on, Sajila, Dr. Summer, and I, and we were talking about the newer generation being very, very committed. And I think also my generation, and we're very committed to a purpose and a sense of mission. And for certain generations, that trumps everything else, and for certain demographics. So having that really clear mission, having that unique standout in places like Dallas, for example, or the DMV area, or where there's a saturation of Islamic schools, the Chicagoland area, what makes your school stand out? If you are unable to have a salary that's as competitive as those really established schools, for example, perhaps your branding can help you identify what makes your school so unique. That can attract then the staff that you want, frankly, to be part of your school, who believe in your mission and who believe in that approach. Definitely, we can't be around right now and not have a strong social media presence. Being on all, customizing your different branding, messaging on different social media is probably something that's very wise and worthwhile to invest in. And when you don't have a strong budget to pay for all of that, then thinking creatively about maybe having an intern, or relying on a couple of dedicated volunteers. Maybe some parents who are invested in having the school thrive can, at in the beginning, support you in your social media presence. ISLA, of course, many of you know, does provide job posting benefits for its member schools. So we encourage you, if you're not a member school of ISLA, to become a member school, to post with our online presence. We do send out weekly emails. And think about other places where you can post. The masajid. We partner with Masjid Solutions, for example, to develop our website. They're building out a job posting and partnership with other masajid nationwide so that we can get our jobs posted more broadly, virtually, and on like the screens in our masjids as well. This was a really interesting example, and I think I'm kind of at time, so I'm going to go through a little bit quicker, but this was a very interesting example that was given for to me. So you know how a lot of our schools will have like an open house for parents, interested families, and you'll walk them through and you'll have a presentation. So one recommendation that was made to me as I was preparing for this presentation was that their school actually does a symposium for teachers, or for prospective teachers and prospective employees. So you'll have a half day event and you'll advertise it everywhere. And it's not just like a job fair where you're just talking about the open positions, but you're giving them the tour. You're having breakfast and lunch. Should go without saying that you do feed them. And then you do a presentation about your school and you talk about what makes your school very unique. And, the key here is to try and get those teachers, those prospective teachers, to come in. So again, advertising will be key here. But that was an interesting example that I thought might be something that our schools might not have considered, or many of our schools might not have thought about yet, and might be something that they could consider, and especially earlier on in the hiring season. Another thing that was suggested was word of mouth. When you're branding your school, don't forget that your teachers could be your greatest ambassadors for the school. So if they're happy, and we'll get to retention in the next two slides, if they're happy, they're going to be perhaps some of your strongest avenues for getting more qualified and interested staff or potential staff. And think about, and you could have that conversation with your board about paying for referrals. We know how taxing it is on the time of the person who's looking to hire, whether that's the principal or the board members. Why not pay your teachers who are satisfied with school for a successful hire, and give a sign-on bonus to both them and perhaps even to your new hire. That's another strategy that's used in many different fields. Um, and one of the other things that we have to think about is that you want to hire people who want to learn how to become great teachers. So sometimes you don't have the staff and the qualifications that you really want. So you might consider growing your talent internally. Actually, Sister Lisa Kaler wrote a phenomenal article that was published in Islamic Horizons. I don't know if she's able to link to that article, but one of the things she wrote about in there was to grow your volunteer and intern pool. Sometimes that's a great way for you to kind of see who's going to be a strong potential candidate when you do need to fill your full-time positions as well. Of course, we know having a robust pay and benefits package is going to be a strong pull in hiring. And one of the things that I've seen also, we're talking about all talent. I know we focus more on teachers, but especially for your administrative staff, definitely consider paying for relocation fees. This is where you're going to be more likely to attract candidates that are from out of town. And so you want to pay for them to come and visit your school, make sure that they're a good fit. Those kinds of things I know are hard to cover when you're on a tight budget, but it's worth it to make sure that you have the right fit, because if you don't, then that whole cycle opens back up, right? So that's something to consider. And then have creative benefits. If you can't hire competitively, you don't have a competitive pay, come up with creative benefits. Some of those creative benefits that were suggested was like offer free lunch to your teachers every Friday, or once a month, perhaps. Maybe give them a budget if your school is a school that provides lunches anyways. And so I'll get into a little bit more. Sorry, one other thing in terms of growing your own talent is consider alternatives, paying for your talent for potential talented people who are interested. Maybe right now they're a teacher aide to get certified, or you have a teacher but they don't have certification. Pay for them to get certified. Get your board members on board to cover a portion of that, fundraise with them and through them. And then 50% to be covered by the teacher. This was something that was suggested and that is being used actually by a school in Atlanta. And the agreement is that it's a signed agreement with the teacher that they stay on for 3 to 5 years. And if they leave, then they have to pay back that amount that was covered by the school. And then retention, student discount is a very strong reason for many staff or many potential interested people to come on. So having a student discount, tuition discount, professional development. Sajila already spoke a lot about that. Free lunch. Another interesting thing was partnership with a university. See if you can work out an MOU where they're able to take discounted courses at the university so that they can get, again, credentialed at a higher rate. And then another thing that I've seen is that Islamic schools that actually benchmark their salaries against the district that they're located in, and they make that salary scale public so that it doesn't feel, again, that builds staff morale, that transparency. We do have data that indicates teachers leave the profession within the first 5 years because either they feel ill prepared or don't feel supported in their role. So again, all of these techniques are responding to that data point. I do want to take just a minute, I know at time, to also share, we're here with you as partners, thinking creatively, trying to think creatively about what we can do to support this hiring and retention difficulty. And one of the really cool things that we're going to be pursuing this year, inshallah, May 18th, Sunday, May 18th, is we're going to host a virtual job fair. And we're starting small. We only have limited number of spots for schools to become sponsors here. But we're inviting you to join and check out, the opportunity to be part of this V Fair. This is kind of like what it would look like for our participants. They would be part of this virtual 3D environment. Your school's information would be in different portions of this V Fair, where you would be able to then have applicants come and have a time where they are, meeting with you, and the applicants can also choose exactly like a time that they can meet with you. So we're trying to think creatively as well with you all, inshallah. And I'm not sure if that went to my other tab, but take a look at that. Inshallah, I'll share more about this at our admin meeting tomorrow for member schools. So Jazakallah khair. I'm so sorry that I went way over. And I will.
Who's that? Thank you very much, Dr. Faza, and thank you again, Sajila, for the very informative session. It's really beneficial. And I mean, as we discussed before, diagnosing the problem is big part of the solution. And thank you for addressing that. Now, I will open the floor to questions and answers. I know we have few questions in the log. Do you have balanced conversation with teachers who really wants to work at Islamic school, but also desire to involve salary with the pushback from the school that want teacher to sacrifice their desire for good salary for the sake of Allah? Would you like to address that, Sajila or Dr. Shada? Did we lost Dr. Shada?
No,
Okay.
I'm here. I'm trying to find the question that you just read, Dr. Summer.
If you
In the
click,
Q&A box.
Oh, okay, got it. All right, so this first question from Sister Mesa.
mhm.
Yeah. With the pushback from schools that want teachers to sacrifice their, I think Sister Mesa, and I'm not sure, are you a school leader here who's speaking from that perspective, like as an administrator? I think, I think you have to know your audience, first of all. And this is a conversation where I think absolutely teachers deserve to have a livable salary. And if people choose to sacrifice that desire for a livable the good salary for the sake of Allah, like I don't think that we can be in the business of judging somebody who wants to be paid. It doesn't mean either or, right? Because somebody wants to be paid a livable salary doesn't mean that they're still not engaged in it for the sake of Allah. And so I definitely have seen this and I've heard this and I've been on the receiving end of it, right? Like as a teacher in an Islamic school, like, well, you shouldn't be expecting more. And it's very off-putting. It's very off-putting, even if you were not doing it for, nobody's going into education. Halas, nobody's going into education for the money, right? Like, let's be real. But to then like put it like that, I don't feel like this is the proper adab. I think that we need to engage in a multi-pronged approach, not just with the teachers. So I think first of all, we need to validate teachers and let them know, yes, you deserve to be paid a livable wage. And if you are a school that cannot provide that, to still validate that you deserve this and we're working on it. And then to genuinely be engaged in working on increasing teacher salaries. And part of that is an education campaign. I've heard Sister Mesa in California say this with New Horizon, Orange Crescent, Orange County. I'm not messing up her school name. Talk about how they engaged in a educational campaign with their community to say, look, this is what our teachers in our district receive, and this is what our teachers are receiving here, and this is the cost of living, right? And just like being really transparent about that and saying, and then having a game plan. This is why we need to increase our tuition and fees, and inshallah also working on increasing the ability for access and not creating barriers to access for families that can't pay those increased fees. But subhanallah, I mean, I guess I don't have an answer, Mesa, but I think that if I'm just really brief with this, I think you validate that our teachers do deserve to receive a livable wage. And if and when we're not able to provide that, that's not right. And we see that and we believe that, and we're working on trying to improve it and genuinely trying to work on that.
I really appreciate the answer and livable salary. It's not only just for good living, it's also, I mean, it's a chance for professional growth, professional development. I mean, a lot of time there is conferences we would like to attend, but we cannot afford it, or workshops we like to go to, and the school doesn't pay for it. It's really, but also we understand the challenges the Islamic school goes through. It's, I mean, the problem has so many layers. However, still, teachers deserve to get paid well. I mean, we have another comment here. I know my school feels that we need to be able to pay our teachers what they are worth. I would hope all the school want to do this as well. I hope so too. Anybody would like to comment? Dr. Shada or Sajila?
Yeah, I
Honestly,
mean, I think even saying that out loud is really valuable. It's not enough, and that's just something that we have to say, right? But I think that it is something though to say it out loud and say, yes, we do want to pay our teachers more, and if I can just share like some of the stuff that we're trying to do, even at ISLA as a nonprofit,
mhm,
right? Like
mhm,
we're investing in strategies for how do you engage in fund development. What are creative ways to do that? Um, yeah. So, okay, now I'm just seeing her. The catch 22 is that low pay for teachers, but parents do not want to have their tuition raised either. I know, Jamie, and I'm also like, I'm a parent as well of children. Dr. Summer and I were talking about that. Like, the tuition is higher than our mortgage, right? Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, that Allah allowed us still to be able to have both a home, a mortgage, and as the ability to have an Islamic full-time Islamic school to send our children to, and our Islamic school keeps raising the tuition for these reasons, right? And as parents, we grumble and we, are disgruntled, and maybe we complain, but we continue to choose to send our children there. And I do think that though our schools do need to continue to work on engaging with our local governments to see if your school and state doesn't already provide vouchers or tax credits to families to be able to choose schools. Like that is actually a worthwhile effort to engage in. That is actually not as much a partisan issue as it becomes in general public discourse. But that's one thing. And like, yeah, the fundraising piece, finding those donors that are willing to invest in the scholarships, and then having a system. Sajila talked about systems and processes and procedures for ensuring that those scholarships are then equally made available to all people in need. That's also really important. Yeah, Sister Lisa also sharing here, um, diversifying revenue income strands, right? Endowments, a wealth, um, DAFs, grants, tuition, merchandise, community grants, right? We have some schools that are been able to tap into state grants for to be able to subsidize things that otherwise their school budget would have to pay for. So all of these are really good ideas. I know it's a lot of work. Um, I do think that it's worth for our schools to consider hiring a development manager. Again, all of those things, I know it's overwhelming. It can be overwhelming, but these are all different avenues to take, and we start somewhere, and we continue to put in our effort and make dua, and continue to do the work, inshallah.
inshallah, inshallah. I mean, and I can tell also from my experience, it's just, and everybody's experience, even the weekend school teachers suffer with less pay and more expense, and we shouldn't guilty the teacher. So like you're working for the sake of Allah, there is a dinner has to be put on the table too. So inshallah, the future is promising. At least we know now there is a problem and we diagnose it, and we probably, if we put our heads together, we can come up with solution. If there is no more questions, I guess we went over time. Actually, we finished exactly on time. There is, which is amazing. Uh, if there is no more questions, I would like to wish you a wonderful night, and thank you for attending the session. Also, I invite you to attend. Anybody coming to Chicago, I will be there,
Mhm.
and I think Shaza and Sajila will be there, right?
I will be there. I'll be there. We'll have a booth there. I'll be there. Sister Lisa will be there. And we're here. Like, we want to hear your comments. We want to hear your thoughts, Brother Fawad. I saw that you wanted to share something else. Join us at tomorrow's administrators meeting at 11 a.m. We want to hear from you. We don't have all the answers. I think that's the key. But we're here with you trying to come up with the solutions and trying to, just be partners in driving the improvement of our Islamic schools for the betterment of our children and for the sake of Allah, inshallah. May Allah be pleased and accept from us. Dr. Samar, if I may just end with the dua.
Yes, ma'am.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. And of course, I give it back to you, Dr. Summer, to conclude in whatever way. Really appreciate Wiser and ISPU's, really foundational work in providing this kind of data, and the recommendations were on point. MashaAllah.
Thank you. And we really appreciate ISLA, and every educational institute came from the umbrella of ISNA and CISNA. And I'm not going to mention now organization because I'm afraid I will forget some of you, but every single organization make a difference, and it's very inspiring. I would like to remind everybody to register at Wiser. I mean, our registration is free, or our membership is free. If you have weekend school, please put it on our map and benefit from our resources. If you have any questions or any concern, please reach out. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Support us in every by spreading the word. If I have the power to build weekend school in every corner, I want stop. 95% of our Muslim kids, they go to weekend
Mhm.
school. Not everybody can afford full time. I mean, the sacrificing Shada and myself and a lot of you did for full time school. Not everybody able to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Dr. Summer. Big
And
believer in the weekend schools, and Wiser, very much needed.
it's very much needed. With that, I will recite Surah Al-Asr and we will conclude our meeting. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر صدق الله العظيم. With that, I leave you with a lot of love. Stay safe and have a wonderful night, and see you in Chicago.
All right, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Jazakum
Thank you,
khairan.
everyone.
Thanks, Sajila.